Joining today's research briefing on revisiting your MarTech stack. My name is Scott Dill. I'm on the business development team here at Real Story Group, and our company founder and the co-author of the soon-to-be released book on the right way to select technology, Tony Byrne, will be joining us on the line momentarily. And really, selecting digital technology is the core of our business, and that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. Is we help our customers select the solutions that are going to be the right fit for their particular needs. And we do that in a few different ways. First and foremost is our research. We publish detailed evaluations of over 150 vendors, 150 solutions from over 100 vendors in the digital technology marketplace, more specifically digital marketing and digital workplace technology. We also provide tools to our subscribers to help them really narrow down their focus and see which solutions are the right fit for them, and then be able to compare those particular products side by side with each other. We also provide advisory services during key parts of your decision process, and whether that's doing a deep dive on a particular vendor, or if you're not sure whether to look into a new technology product, we can provide some guidance for you on whether it makes sense to divorce from your current vendor. And then there's also an application we have called RealScore, where you can benchmark how effective your people, your process, and your technologies really are in your system, and then see how you're doing against your industry peers, and then across all verticals that we cover. Also, what makes us unique and different in the marketplace, in the analyst world, is the fact that we do no work for the vendors that we cover. So Tony founded this company 16 years ago along the guise of Consumer Reports, where we don't have any sort of quid pro quo set up with the vendors. We don't speak at their conferences or write white papers for them. Our only focus is on you as a technology user and buyer. And we find that to be the only way to really give you the true, real story about the solutions and where they're good fits. So here's a quick look at our coverage areas, and what you'll notice on this recently updated map is the fact that we've added CRM research to our portfolio, and those evaluations will be forthcoming in the coming weeks. But today what we're going to do is actually focus on marketing automation and campaign and lead management technology. So I'm going to turn things over to Tony, and he's going to take it from there.
Great, thanks. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. This whole notion of MarTech stack, we have been sort of following this phenomenon over the past couple of years. We certainly have also been looking at employee experience stacks, but the MarTech stack world has just exploded. Stacks are getting bigger and more complicated. Just the whole notion that you've got a stack, I think, has been a really important breakthrough in the past several years. And so now's a really good time to take a look at it. So it's going to be a really fast-paced session today. If you have any questions or comments or anything you'd like to contribute, feel free to use the questions tab in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll definitely have time at the end to get to that. Also, you're all going to receive a copy of this presentation in the next 24 hours or so, and those of you whose employers are Real Story Group subscribers, you'll have access to an on-demand playback of this entire webinar that you can share with your colleagues. So let's look at the agenda. We're going to look at 3 different ways of visualizing your stack, and sort of help you understand how you can use those to then potentially make some different strategic choices, and what might you want, what's really critical for you to do and what's not so critical. And then we'll close up, as we always do, with what's the right way, if you're in the market for new tools, what's the right way to get a new or replacement supplier for a particular component in your stack. So like I said, this whole notion of digital marketing stacks has really taken off, inspired very much by Scott Brinker at chiefmartech.com. You've probably all seen this diagram in the upper left. The last couple of years, I've had the pleasure of speaking and teaching at his conferences, and one of the more interesting parts of it is so-called Stacky Awards. All kinds of different stacks that you can see. What's amazing about them, the hundreds that get submitted, is the sheer diversity of them, but also how they have all dramatically expanded. The typical enterprise now has between 16 and 24 solutions in their digital marketing and engagement stack. In many cases, in terms of some of the contributors, some of the larger contributors, it was up to several dozens of tools. So we have a notion that there is a digital marketing stack. I think what's up for some constructive debate is, what should that stack look like, and how do I interpret what's going on, and what's the best strategy going forward to really get a handle at an enterprise level what's going on, and making the right choices that are going to move the needle for us. So there's a couple ways of doing this. There's one that we like, that we've been talking about recently with some of our subscribers. Is one way to visualize this is to think less of a stack and more sort of a flatter, almost like a MarTech Mall, right? And so this is a potential MarTech environment for a consumer products good company. If your firm is different, maybe yours would look different, but the idea here is that you have these anchor tenants in your stack. These are critical technologies that you need to get right. They're the ones that you're going to spend a lot of time in. But then you may need a number of boutique services around that. And those are things that you may experiment with. You may not require as much in terms of integration or technical compatibility. They're more than likely to be cloud solutions. And so you can experiment with some of these other capabilities. So you've got, experience services like content marketing, video marketing, SEO, and so forth, commerce and sales, advertising and promotion, social engagement, so on and so forth. So the key thing here is, again, to figure out what are the anchors in your environment. And again, this is going to vary. So, we had an interesting conversation with one of our subscribers, the major mutual fund, earlier this year, and then they had a very different set of anchors and a very different set of boutiques. But the key thing is that they realized that there were certain capabilities that were really going to be core, that were going to be feeding content and data to other systems, right? And so the key takeaway from this is to really understand what are our anchors, and also to make sure that you get them right. So if there's a more sort of boutique-y type add-on type solution, if you don't get it right, the consequences are less impactful. If you don't get the anchors right, if you don't have the right technologies and also the right capabilities internally and operationally to really leverage them, then you're going to have severe problems throughout your mall. So this is sort of one way of looking at it. And the reality is, though, that for these anchors, you have, as you know, a lot of choices. These are some of the collection of the tools that we evaluate for some of the anchors you saw on the previous page: campaign and lead management, digital marketing, asset management, web content and experience management. They're highly fragmented marketplaces. And so in some cases, you'll even see an organization that has, even two of something. We don't always recommend that. In fact, we're often going in and helping our subscribers sort of consolidate, okay, what's core and what's non-core. And it turns out that, some of these use cases may be more boutique-y than anchors. But the key thing is really to make sure that you've got your anchors kind of set, because that's what's drawing all this energy into your MarTech Mall. Of course, what vendors will tell you is a somewhat different story, that, if you're particularly larger ones, Adobe, IBM, Oracle, Salesforce, to a lesser extent, OpenText, will say, hey, look, you can get all of this stuff from us. So you should just, look at our marketing suite, which they now call, Marketing Cloud, term that's taken off, obviously, in the market. Just come to our Marketing Cloud and we'll take care of this for you. This is typically a mistake to just default to a single vendor for all of your different anchors. It could be that you have a particular vendor for one of your anchors, and then maybe they're also doing some boutique things for you. This obviously makes things easier from a contracting standpoint. Look, I've just got one vendor, and it creates the allure that potentially, by going with a single vendor, I'm going to mitigate these often very difficult integration issues. The reality is that most of these tools in these so-called clouds have been acquired, come from different technology bases. Some run on-premise, some run in different clouds. And so there's always going to be an integration challenge, whether you're getting multiple tools from the same vendor or not. So there are reasons to consolidate if you've got two tools that are doing the same thing. But for tools that are doing different things, we have seen, certainly anecdotally, and now there's survey data to suggest that customers who approach this more from a capability standpoint as opposed to a vendor consolidation standpoint find better success, have more effective staff and more effective campaigns. So that's sort of the mall type approach, which is to get your anchors right. Of course, you can also take a more traditional kind of services stack. So this is our digital engagement reference model. So this is a pretty traditional kind of stack approach. This is the second way to look at it. And this is a generic reference model that we put together. And you probably will recognize it. You've got the data at the bottom, where ideally you've got an enterprise data foundation, business intelligence, analytics, potentially product information management, master data management, ERP, of course, CRM, very important in this whole thing. And ideally, you're able to construct some sort of enterprise data backbone. That is, of course, easier said than done, but some of our subscribers are increasingly effective at this. But then you get to the next tier, content and engagement management. This is where the marketing magic really happens, right? So you need digital and asset management, web content and experience management, marketing automation and email marketing, and then, of course, social engagement, which can span a variety of different dimensions. And on top of that, you've got various layers in terms of the actual production of these experiences, the delivery of this content, the interaction with individuals, so on and so forth, out through a variety of different channels out to your customers and prospects. So this is a fairly traditional stack. This is a generic reference model, but it can also help you sort of understand how the different pieces fit together. So, and in particular, I think it helps you understand the really critical importance of separating your core data systems from your engagement systems. And you'll get pushback from vendors here who would wish that you, from an engagement perspective, that they also serve as, in a sense, your virtual data warehouse as well. And you really want to stay away from that. You really want your data to be independent, your core data to be independent of your content and engagement management layers. So this helps you sort of understand separation of concerns, and can also help you in terms of, what are the critical investments that you should be making. So this sort of traditional stack approach is also useful in terms of identifying, what should we really be focusing on? So, for example, what is your center? So what we do very often with our subscribers is take this generic reference model and then kind of adapt it for them. This is a large international advocacy organization that emailed 2 million people on a regular basis. There are 2 million members, in some cases daily and even weekly and even daily. So the center of their stack really was their marketing automation platform. That was the most important investment they were going to make. And then some of the other things around that then were subsidiaries and sort of feeding into it. So the key takeaway from this stack is it can help you sort of figure out and then visualize, what is my center? What's the most important thing that I need to be doing? And that may be the most important investment I'm going to make. And then I'm going to make sure that my other systems then can integrate with this. So it's sort of like the center of your engagement stack. Here was another one for a global consumer products good, where their center was really around digital and media asset management. And that's increasingly the case that we see at CPG. My colleague Jared just put out a really great blog post about that you can find on our website. So for them, the really critical investment they were going to make was in digital and media asset management. And then from there, they were going to be driving those assets through various web, mobile, and social channels. But they had to get that piece right. And they had to make a significant investment in making sure that they had the right suppliers, but also the right capability and, quite frankly, the right assets, all tied into their enterprise data backbone, so that they could do the sorts of multi-channel B2B and B2C delivery of content, data, and experiences out to their customers. Once again, if you have any questions or comments at all throughout this webinar, feel free to use the questions tab in the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a third way of looking at your stack, and in some ways this is really the best way to start, and it isn't really at this point even a stack at all. This is a more customer-centered engagement model where the customer is at the middle. So you can remember in the previous one, it was really the enterprise looking at itself, right? In this one, it's really what is the what does the customer need and what are they trying to do with us? So we start with the customer at the middle in the yellow, where they're looking for utility, enablement, value, inspiration, and maybe even delight. And there's certain things you can see in the red that they want to do with you. They may want to discover certain things, then they may wish to transact with you, and then ultimately they want to belong and have a sense of engagement. This then leads to various customer journeys. And to realize those journeys, you need in the gray particular business platforms. And to be effective across the board, you need in the purple various enterprise services. This is a way of looking at your marketing stack from the outside in, or from the where the customer is at the center. So the customer, basically, we're inside out, starting with them and their experience with you. And so there's various things that they want to do, and those journeys really should be understood as particular business applications, or really business products with business product owners, where IT is just supplying the actual platforms. So there's a lot of things that fall out of this. One is really thinking about our systems in terms of how the customer is interacting with them rather than what we're actually doing. So we're kind of inverting the traditional grammar where we, enterprise, do something to customer. Instead, it's customer do something with us, the enterprise. So it's a way of looking at your systems really from their perspective as opposed to yours. And there's a number of different things you can do with this in terms of, really coming up with the most effective strategies. One thing that we'd like to do with this is to work with some of our subscribers to do heat maps. This was one around, it was a major mutual fund company, actually, and we were able to work with various teams, and they had done quite a bit of analysis, both qualitative and quantitative, from a customer perspective of the customer experience. And then we were able to sort of map that against these different systems and look at, both from a technology and an operational effectiveness standpoint, where were they doing well and where weren't they? And it was very interesting. Just a single graphic was quite eye-opening. And what they uncovered from this, which hadn't been immediately apparent, that they had some significant gaps in digital and media asset management, as well as content and experience management. A lot of fragmented systems, fragmented responsibilities, and quite frankly, the wrong technologies as well. So it really helped drive them that those were going to be the investments that they were going to make going forward, both from a capability standpoint and a human standpoint, an organizational standpoint, but also from a technology standpoint. Also uncovered a number of interesting corollary things, including product information management, which was a bit of a mess, and in analytics as well. So this is a way of sort of starting with how effectively is the customer interacting with you, and then driving towards what are the changes that we need to make in our MarTech stack going forward. So if you are going to make changes, there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do this. The right way is to take an agile approach. Very often we see enterprises doing a more waterfall approach, where they either make a decision randomly based on some incumbent technologies that they already have, or they go through these exhaustive analytical exercises, which are conducted primarily on Excel tables with these long lists of requirements, and then they do a very, very short, if any, sort of testing and hands-on phase, which is a very sort of waterfall approach to this. What we recommend instead, having learned this over the past really 16 to 20 years, is to take a more agile approach, which is team-based and very test-oriented. So it's not hitting the perfect requirements up front, and instead getting in front of the technology and getting hands-on with the technology sooner. So it's more test-oriented, it's hands-on. As you can see here, it's iterative as you filter down an inverted triangle, and it's adaptive. So your requirements evolve as you understand what the technology can do, and then ultimately leading to very, very important endpoint here, which is to have a bake-off between two vendors. Along the way, you want to avoid things like this. We're having a little bit of a joke here about the magic quadrant, but there's a tendency to look at who's leading, who's lagging, and to treat this as sort of a horse race and then making decisions that way. The problem with these static quadrants is that they aren't actually made for you. They're made at some level for vendors to market themselves, but also they tend to overweight larger vendors. They tend to underweight open source, among other things. And so there is a value in sort of vendor quadrants, but it should be one that's really highly tailored and specialized for you. So to that extent, I'll suggest that you try out Real Quadrant. You can try it out for free at realstorygroup.com/tools. This is a shortlist generator that generates a custom shortlist based on your unique considerations, in particular the specific use cases, because it's use cases that really differentiate these tools, as well as strategic intangibles among the vendors to get you to the right shortlist. And then the system will output a custom research with all of the strengths and weaknesses and hard-hitting analysis that you know and are familiar that we've been producing for the last 16 years. So let's do some key takeaways here. First, there are multiple ways to envision your stack, and you should definitely experiment with all three. So you can think of this sort of flat mall approach to really guide your investments in key anchor areas. What are our anchors, and where can we then safely experiment with different tools, and also to understand that there's going to be a whole wide variety of services here, and that you should avoid defaulting to a single marketing cloud vendor to do more than it should be doing for you. You could think of the traditional kind of vertical and horizontal stack that you saw, the so-called layer cake diagram, still have value. They help you understand how you need to separate out your data and engagement and delivery tiers. So you have proper separation of concerns, helps you understand how the pieces fit together and where you're going to need to integrate. And also you can adapt a reference model like that to help you find your center. What's the key piece that's providing services that others are consuming? Then take an agile approach to selecting technology based on looking at it from the customer in other words, looking at where are the tools and services that you need to improve, and then honing in on specific technology areas. Don't default to an incumbent just because you have it lying around, because you already licensed something from Oracle, that therefore you're also going to, because you're using it for email marketing, you're also going to use it for social media management. So you want to take a team-based iterative approach that's highly empirical and hands-on and allows you to adapt your requirements over time. And along the way, welcome you to use tools and advice from Real Story Group to help you with your decision making. So I'll remind you once again, you can always ask questions in the GoToMeeting control tab. Some of them are coming in now. As I get them organized here, Scott, you can just wrap up for us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. And as Tony mentioned, you can try out Real Quadrant for yourself on our websites. And if you're interested in seeing the extra goodies, so to speak, that come with a subscription, just reach out to us at explore@realstorygroup.com, and we'd be happy to take you on a behind-the-scenes tour of the Real Story Group subscriber experience. With subscriptions, you can have access to Tony and the rest of our analyst team to provide advisory services and guidance for you on some of the best practices, as well as the pitfalls to avoid from our 16 years of following the enterprise technology customers that we're fortunate enough to work with. Looks like there are a few questions, Tony, if you want to get to those.
So Mike is asking, what happens when we're stuck with legacy systems? We see this a lot, and particularly with organizations that have been doing this for a while. who come out of this. Sometimes they have old sort of direct marketing platforms that they're trying to extend to the digital age, or we certainly see a lot of legacy WCM and DAM and CRM out there, and a surprising amount of technical debt. And with each passing year, it can be more and more untenable. I think the key there is to come up with a business case for why that system needs to be replaced, and to be clear that each year that you postpone that, it's going to make the migration all that much more difficult. Mike's also asking about staff training and development included, and that's obviously really critical. I think, when we go through some of the real score benchmarking with some of our subscribers, I think one of the things that comes up almost ubiquitously is incredible resource shortages, human resource shortages, and that can be skills, experience, and just the sheer number of people that you need in the cockpit here. And skills and experience are a tough one, because obviously experience takes time. Skills require people who are both ready and able to adapt those skills, and sometimes this leads to some tough choices. But operationally, I think that may even be bigger than the technology gap is the operational gap that we see. Brad's asking to list some reasons why you might pick one vendor over another, and when you might pick an internal system over a cloud system. And so the reasons really boil down to fitness for a purpose, really, to your use case. And then, of course, other things where you need to manage trade-offs around things like TCO, architectural fit, and strategic alignment, all the sort of traditional things. But fitness to purpose really should be driving you and the way to do that is through making sure that you've got a good set of use cases or user stories, and that you need to be able to accomplish with this technology, and make sure that that's what's driving it rather than feature checklists. So Michael's asking, will we get a copy of the presentation? And yes, everyone will get a copy of the presentation. If your employer, Michael, is a Real Story Group subscriber, you'll also have access to an on-demand video. Let's see, Jess is asking, where is Microsoft in all of this? I didn't see them very central on your map. So Microsoft is at the center of our subway map, but it's very interesting that in this sort of domain, the MarTech domain, with the exception of their CRM, their dynamic CRM offering, Microsoft has been very quiet. They more or less exited the WCM space. They more or less exited the digital asset management space as they really pushed forward with SharePoint as a workplace rather than external engagement platform. And as they made that decision around SharePoint, they definitely left a kind of a vacuum in the space for the last 10 years. So they've done some very interesting things with Dynamics. You can read all of the skinny on that in our CRM research. But one area where they've also pulled back from Dynamics is in terms of some of the digital marketing. So Microsoft is, for better or worse right now, sort of AWOL in this. And I think that they're rethinking their strategy around this whole segment. I suspect that we'll see later this year, maybe next year, potentially some acquisitions or some significant product development in this space. But on the whole, with the exception of CRM, Microsoft has really been focused a lot on workplace experiences as opposed to customer experiences. And I think it will be a heavy lift for them to get back into the game on the external side. Not prohibitively heavy, but they may need to make some acquisitions to get there. So Brad is asking, how do you sort out what a salesperson says the software can do versus what it's really good at? Yeah, we call this the bullshit gap, and it's a serious gap. And the only way to do that, Brad, is to actually put the software through its paces yourself, and not have them drive the demo. But to the extent that you're in the demo round that you saw in that inverted triangle, that they're demoing your use cases rather than theirs. And then when you go through the bake-off, which Brad is really, really, really critical to making the right selection, that you are hands-on, actually are trained to use the technology and are trying it yourself so that you know whether it's going to work for you. And at the end of the day, that's the only way to do this. And I'm continually amazed and horrified by enterprises, including enterprises much larger than yours probably, Brad, who literally make big software bets without ever trying out the technology. I mean, you wouldn't buy a car without test driving it. Don't buy technology without test driving it as well. So with that, we reached the bottom of the half hour. Thank you for joining us. It was a real pleasure being with you today, and look forward to staying connected at these coordinates on your screen. And so have a great rest of your week. And for Real Story Group and my colleagues Scott and Alina, this is Tony Byrne signing out. Bye now.